How's it going, everyone? This is Kienzan Art, and I'm going to walk you through the process of creating this Majin Vegeta cutout.
This is a harmonious beat.
The initial phase of the cutout is pretty straightforward. All I'm doing is cutting the material in half and then gluing the two boards to make a panel. When joining the boards, you're going to get some squeeze out, so be sure to have some water nearby and paper towels or a rag to wipe off the excess glue. After gluing up the panel, you're going to see me jump straight into the drawing portion, but keep in mind that the glue needs time to dry. I do believe that the drying time for the wood glue is 30 minutes to an hour, but as far as putting pressure to the joint, you need to wait at least 24 hours, and I waited, I think I didn't start drawing on the panel until like a good 2 days later. So now with your initial sketch, don't worry about being super detailed. The main thing here is you want accurate proportions. Now with that being said, you see me placing the eyes and the nose and the upper chest and some of the neck muscle. That is a guideline to make sure that my proportions are accurate. And once you're satisfied with your sketch, then it's time to cut. When cutting, I clamp my piece down to my work surface to stabilize my piece and ensure accuracy. If I didn't clamp it down, my piece would bounce all over the place and could possibly lead to injury. As I cut close to the line but not directly on the line. If I cut too far into the piece, I could skew my proportions. Remember, you can always take off material, but you can't always add material. Once the cutting portion was complete, I noticed that Vegeta's shoulder was a bit off, and I had to improvise. So what I did was took a scrap piece of wood, grabbed my pocket jig, and glued and screwed it together. First, I clamped the piece down on its back and lined it up with a scrap. This was just to ensure that both of them were even. Then I took the piece and flipped it face down in order for the pocket hole to be on the back, as I was uncertain of how much material would be needed, and I did not want that size cavity to reside on the front of my piece. The clamp is utilized to obtain a flat and even glue up, but also I don't have to struggle holding two pieces at once. I can just take the scrap piece, push it against it, and screw it in. With the scrap attached, I proceed to sketch the remainder of the shoulder and cut off any excess material. While doing so, I had to constantly check for the screw, because if it were to cut into the screw, it could cause injury or damage the saw blade. Before removing the screw, I tacked the scrap in place with a few brad nails. This was to prevent the scrap from falling off. The screws and nails were applied for time's sake. I could have clamped and glued the extra material, but that would have required me to put my project on hold until the glue dried. Once the screw was removed, I resorted to my coping saw because I was afraid that the jigsaw would tear off the scrap due to the glue not being dry. But after inspection, I saw that I would have been fine. The material that was needed was minuscule. Then it was back to the jigsaw just to try to clean up that shoulder a bit. At this point in the piece, it's time to fill in the nail holes in the screw hole and clean the entire piece by sanding it with the orbital, front and back, and then hitting it with sandpaper on the sides, edges, and in the crevices. Now it's time to re-sketch the line work and fill in the details. Like any other drawing, I suggest you sketch lightly, because from my experience, it's more difficult to erase dark lines on wood than paper. Sandpaper is always an option, but excessive sanding could produce a divot in your piece, and then you would have to re-sand the whole surface to make it flat. After the drawing is complete, I solidify the lines with my pyrography pen. The lines that are burned keep the watercolor from bleeding. Now, it doesn't prevent this completely because excessive water could cause the colors to spill into each other, or the lines may not have been burned deep enough. For my process of painting, I don't apply a primer coat. I chose this method because I want the paint to emulate wood stain. Now, it's beneficial if you test your colors on a piece of scrap before application. When you do test your colors, I recommend that you use this same species of wood because two different types of wood could yield two different results, and I say and do this to be on the safe side. When painting, allow each layer to dry before applying another one. If you skip this step, you might wind up with a mess. because once the watercolor touches the wood grain, the pigment will expand across the piece and can bleed into other areas, even when you do not intend it to do so.
This is a homage beat.
For the gloves, I switched from watercolor to colored pencil. I've tried to use white watercolor in the past and it was just not pigmented enough. This could be due to the grade of paint it was, but I would recommend that you switch to colored pencil or use acrylic if you need to apply white or gray. After the piece is painted, I go back over the line work. The burner indents the wood and the paint will dry in and on the line work. For the line work to pop, I go over it a second time. This really makes a difference. Also, when you're using the pyrography pen, I would recommend that you wear a respirator mask. You do not want to be inhaling the smoke that stems from the pen touching the wood. This isn't necessary, only a precaution to your lungs. To finish the piece, I apply water-based polyurethane. Spray in a sweeping motion 10 to 12 inches away from your piece. After applying 5 to 6 coats of poly, I then sand with 800 grit sandpaper. Make sure not to sand too rigorously because you can sand through the polyurethane and then start to remove your painting. White residue that you see here on the sandpaper is polyurethane. If I sanded too rigorously or didn't have enough coats on the piece, you would probably see some yellow here on the sandpaper or some of the skin tone as well. Continue sanding until smooth, but do not over sand. After sanding, wipe the piece down with a t-shirt or rag to remove the dust. After removing the dust, it's time to apply more polyurethane. I'm just removing any leftover residue from the nozzle so it doesn't affect the spray. I continue to apply polyurethane and sand in between coats until I obtain my desired finish. I'm extremely happy with this piece. It came out way better than I expected. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like the video, share, and comment your thoughts down below. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments section. And if you have any video suggestions, things that you would like to see me do, things that you would like to see me draw or make, leave those down below. Thanks guys, until next time.